Charles, I don't know if you've seen this movie, but we've got HELLBIDEN today.
Seen it. I'm living it.
Exactly. How are you, Charles?
No, the art department is once again has outdone itself. I mean, I actually saw a television advertisement for there's some new service. I think it might be on Etsy, ETSY, where you can take an image like this and they'll create a little, either a stuffed animal or a figure or whatever.
Wow.
And
we could get a stuffed HELLBIDEN. It's a good Christmas gift. Now, I saw this movie. I don't remember exactly who all the characters are, but we've got Hillary Clinton here pictured as some sort of a fish person, which seemed appropriate. Biden is obviously HELLBIDEN himself with the chops. And, I don't know what the logo... Oh, because Hellboy works for like the Supernatural Enforcement Bureau or something like that. So I changed that for Black Lives Matter because that's obviously who Joe Biden is working for. And he's got Christopher Wray and Merrick Garland down there, along with the crackhead in chief, George Soros, and the vestigial vice president, Camel A.
Yeah. I mean, it has been said in the past about very large organizations, and obviously the United States of America, our economy, our government is the largest in the world. It has been said by people who really understand how you change things that trying to change the direction of a very large organization is like trying to turn a supertanker, an oil supertanker, quickly, and that's something you actually can't do. But somehow this idiot, and I mean, it's really to a point now where when you look at contrast the hope and change baloney that he was selling, and he and his people were selling during the campaign, that he was going to be a moderate, a uniter. Not only has he managed to accentuate differences, long-standing, deep-rooted differences between conservatives and Democrats. Yeah, baloney. It's not even beef baloney. Probably fake baloney, if there's a beyond meat baloney. There's no meat in his baloney. But not only has he managed to accentuate tensions between the MAGA crowd and the Clintonista Obama crowd, I think what he's really done we want to be careful with these labels because you could change you could change a few letters there. Anyway, he's also managed, I think, to spark what seems to be a civil war, a brewing civil war between the hard left and whatever moderates remain in the Democratic Party. We now have sort of a three-pronged, minimum three-pronged grudge match where folks close to Biden have got him. I don't know if he's back in D.C. now, but folks close to him are clearly telling him, dude, forget about running in 2024. I mean, that's definitely not going to happen. You can barely walk. And, we have to be on a program here. We don't want to destroy the Democratic Party in its entirety because it will not be replaced by a communist party or a Marxist party. That's never going to happen. So,
wait, that hasn't happened already?
I'm saying you can't sell during an election. You can't sell Marxist policies to the American electorate and expect to win. That's not going to happen. But what I think the money behind it, and David Rubenstein, the founder of Carlyle, has this probably many mansions, but he's got one up in Nantucket where the Biden family have been resident from Tuesday, I guess, through today. And as a guess, the remaining money that would be called upon to finance 2022, 2024, and thereafter is saying, we can't rebuild from this mess that you've managed to create in less than a year. You got to get the puck out of town. And as for electing Kamala Harris, having her fill your shoes, you can forget that. That's not going to happen. That's not saleable. And so, as a guess, there is a battle royal going on with the people who want to push Biden out quickly. Very happy to jump on the Miranda Devine and New York Times stories concerning Hunter Biden. And I would guess that Hillary Clinton, why she would come out of captivity and with a straight face try to make the claim that we don't appreciate all the magnificent accomplishments of the Biden presidency, and then blame that on social media. I mean, this is a message. I mean, she looks like, I mean, she doesn't need a costume to play a frightening person in a horror movie.
I was going to say, is this considered a straight face?
Yeah, oh my God, grandmother, don't try to read me another one of your books. I don't like your fairy tales. But anyway, you have that, and then you have the Harris camp, and I don't know whether Harris was an Obama. Some say that Harris was a creature of Obama, and Obama's very fine with Harris, or whether now Obama is a fourth camp that wants yet somebody else. But it's just on every single front. I mean, the economy, you're down there, and you're not in New York City in the moment, but we're getting these reports from around America now that smash and grab looting is becoming more commonplace. On Thanksgiving Day, as I walked up 6th Avenue, I saw an example of that, of why they broke into a bead store, of all things, one of those cosmetic bead stores. They smashed a window, and there was a security guard at 11 o'clock in the morning sitting inside this thing on Thanksgiving Day trying to protect the remaining stock of beads. But
let's just talk about this for a second, Charles, because this is shocking. I mean, we've heard for, I don't know, maybe about 2 years since the whole free-for-all began, that, this is just property and it's not the same as lives, and, Black Lives Matter and jewelry stores don't. And I'm not equating the value of merchandise to the value of a life, but isn't it true that if this type of behavior becomes normalized, and frankly, we're already in a dangerous zone, this is going to make normal people not want to go to a retail shop for fear that they might be attacked. It's going to make owners of retail shops close their businesses, and it's going to create sort of a climate that is absolutely not conducive to business, and sort of the beginning of the breakdown of society, isn't it?
I think that's the beginning of the breakdown of society. But yes, I mean, we're being told these in soothing tones, as it were, by Hillary Clinton, that all of us are so stupid that we can't figure out what's really going on, and that we need gatekeepers to protect Americans from misinformation. You listen to that, and if you're an idiot, you say, well, maybe I do need a gatekeeper. I'm an idiot. But if you're a normal human being, you say, I don't need no freaking gatekeeper. And that's the polar opposite of what Thomas Jefferson intended, drafting the Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom, which became the basis for the First Amendment, or it is some of the basis of the First Amendment. So you're told that regarding Afghanistan, this idiot, and he really is, he's a circus clown, Millie. He's a dangerous, evil circus clown. That he would have gone into a meeting with the President of the United States, President Trump, and said, of course what we need to do is leave all this equipment behind, $85 billion worth, because it would be very expensive to transport it out of Afghanistan. It's probably pretty expensive to transport all these tanks and planes and helicopters and ammunition and rockets and whatever. Yeah, it's expensive. But, once you pay that money, and you shouldn't have to pay that money because you should have had a plan that made much more sense. Once you pay that money, you get to keep the stuff. You're saying you're going to save, let's say, $8 billion.
And you prevent your enemies from getting it.
Well, exactly.
What's the cost of that?
He's so stupid. He's saying, I want us to save, let's call it $8 billion, because that's what it will cost us to ship all this crap out of Afghanistan. And we'll just give $80 billion to our enemies, $85 billion to our enemies in Afghanistan. And who knows where else all that stuff will end up going. I mean, it's just the kind of stuff where if somebody in a meeting said that to me, who had a high level title, and in business, I have that person fired on the spot.
I love the typical Charles move of just telephoning security. Excuse me, I have to go to the restroom, and just call security, kick this guy out.
No, it's outrageous. I mean, these people do serve at the pleasure of the president. He is the commander-in-chief of all forces. And I mean, Millie's advice was horrible. It is horrible.
Just real quickly, Charles, before we move off of an earlier point that you made, and for people who are watching, you can't see me in this setup, so it's difficult for me to give you hand signals and stuff like that. But you had asked about Barack Obama's potential position on Kamala Harris. I don't know what it is today, but it is interesting. You know, everybody knows that she was hanging out with Willie Brown, and people object to him being 60 and her being 30. I think it's a little bit more of a concern that he was married, but there's actually quite a few pictures of them hanging out and interacting over the years. And I think it's important to remember that news article we were looking at last week where Willie Brown got a low-key early warning about 9/11. So, I mean, you know my theory about the weathermen and follow-on groups potentially having foreknowledge of that incident. I wonder if Kamala wasn't somehow inserted into this whole sort of sphere via Willie Brown.
Could be. I mean, the saga of whether it's young men or young women jumping up into the top ranks by engaging in romantic relationships with either single or married senior people, that's as old as, probably predates the Bible. And it will never, it's not going to be legislated out of existence. We're human. That stuff happens. But on the other hand, if you're going to try to promote the idea that women can accomplish anything, given opportunities, women can accomplish anything, I don't think Kamala Harris is a particularly good role model for the average American woman. And just because you happen to be or identify as a particular gender, that doesn't make you, you can't appoint yourself, even with the media and social media's help, the vanguard for all women, the vanguard for all black women, the vanguard for all blacks, et cetera. And yet that's what the mainstream media tried to do with this really disagreeable, arrogant, cackling moron.
I made her a witch in the image.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a compliment. And in the case of, I'm not just picking on her or women. I mean, I think a lot of the people who are, quote, governing us,
That's a different movie.
Yeah, I know, but they're angry scolds. I mean, I don't need an angry scold in my life. I just don't need that, don't want it. I'm certainly not going to vote for it. And to get Joe Biden up there, every time he's trying to sell one of his cockamamie ideas to us, he starts either lowering his voice or raising his voice and wagging his finger at us and threatening people. This is not what we bargained for. I mean, this is not somebody whose record, his long record. I think he just turned 79, didn't he? I mean, so that gives him 58 years as a somebody of legal age. I don't know that we could point to anything that this man has done that is something to be particularly proud of. I mean, he was
the Platinum Club at Ben and Jerry's.
but you know what I'm saying? I just if you want to put up somebody who's what I like to see in people are a consistent pattern of accomplishment, that somebody starts out, they try one thing, they do a good job at it, maybe they get promoted into a position that they want, a higher position, they do a good job with that, another thing. I like to see that in people in business. But with this guy, I mean, we have to remember that in 1988, when he may have been vibrant, he made all sorts of false claims about his background, knowingly false claims about his background, and had to abandon his presidential campaign and admit that he was a serial liar. This is in 1988. That cake hasn't aged well.
It's hard to imagine that he was able to come back from that.
I know. I mean, just the guy obviously has no shame. And then, I mean, it wasn't as if Barack Obama in 2015 said, all right, Joe, look, you have earned this. You need to take this. We've prepared the ground. You're going to cement my legacy. I need you to run, jump into my shoes. You got the ropes. You've been working cheek to jowl with me. We love you. He didn't do that. He, for some reason, tried to shoehorn in the Wicked Witch of the West and we don't yet know, and I hope we will eventually maybe find out the extent to which Team Obama was well aware of the dirty tricks and worse that the Hillary Clinton extended team was putting in place to both rig the Democratic primaries in her favor and then to savage Trump through the primaries. And then after he became the official nominee, we don't yet know that. But the one thing we do know is that Biden wasn't in the mix in 15 and 16. Now, he could say that it was because of Beau had recently died, his son, and, you know, that's fair. But then when 1920 came around, it wasn't as if there was a preemptive announcement. You know, when Hillary announced for president the first time, she did so on January 20th, 2007. And, you know, i.e. 2 years before she might have, or she thought she would be taking the oath of office on the 20th of January, 2009. And her approach then was extremely aggressive, judging from multiple books written by participants in that campaign. Basically went around to Democrats and said, listen, you know, you may remember what happens to people who cross us in the Democratic Party. And probably not the best idea for you to announce against me, because I'm going to win. And when I win, I'm not going to forget the people who challenged me. That was basically the message. And that message, we see how well that worked. But yet, in January 20th, 2015, we didn't see Joe Biden. I'm sorry, January 20th, 2019, we didn't see Barack Obama saying, you know what, enough is enough. Trump has had his chance. We need a real leader. I'm with Joe. You didn't see that. And that's just, to me, incredibly telling. Then he also got quoted, you know, Obama likes to do all these interviews. Typically, I don't think he's ever done an interview with a tough questioner, but may be wrong on that, but I don't think he has. He certainly hasn't done an extended interview with a tough questioner since becoming senator. And he said at one point to a questioner, Joe, you know, he laughing, he said something like, Joe really knows how to F things up. Well, that's just the kind of person I want as president, somebody who really knows how to F things up. And it's obvious that that's what he did during his entire adult life. Before we get into studying, as we did with Kavanaugh, what was Joe Biden like in high school? I mean, I doubt he was a good charismatic type person. And I would question the way he might have treated women in that period and minorities. But anyway, we're in a place where if you have absolutely no interest whatsoever in politics, and you've never even heard of Joe Biden, you can't be sitting here going to the gas pump, going to the grocery store, if you can get into a restaurant, looking and saying, you know, things are really humming here. You're about to get a notice, you're going to be fired probably, or maybe your family member's been fired, your rent's being jacked up, used car prices are soaring, so you're trying to replace your jalopy and you can't do that because there are no new cars to be had, and used car prices are, you know, soaring up. You're sitting there, beer prices are going up, alcohol's going up, everything's going up. General Mills has announced that they might be raising their prices, and I believe they sell to wholesalers. I mean, they're not selling direct to retail. They're going to raise their prices by as much as 20%.
Wow. You know, cereal is pretty expensive already. I'm kind of surprised, like Cheerios and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I think Biden probably eats Fruit Loops.
You know, it's funny, Charles, that Barack Obama quote of don't underestimate Joe's ability to F things up may prove to be the most memorable Barack Obama. At least it's true. That's the one thing he's told us that's authentic.
Right. And, you know, speaking of some of these F-ups, I mean, if we go back, and I was really amazed back in 2009 when Barack Obama tapped Jeff Immelt, who was then destroying General Electric, to oversee with Joe these shovel-ready jobs. I mean, that was until recently a large amount of money, $800 billion, I believe, 780 billion or something like that, was back in 2009, was a serious amount of money for the government to say that they were going to put into projects that the private sector hadn't thought of doing. And just to refresh people's memory, you know, I would guess that at Crowdsource the Truth, and I could tell you for certain in every company I ever worked for, or had an interest in. We didn't sit around the table smoking dope and drinking booze and, saying, hey, Jason, you're a good person. Well, why don't we spend $93 trillion on climate change? The next person says, well, why don't we spend $100 trillion figuring out exactly where we're located in the universe? I mean, just ridiculous projects. In the private sector, people fight, not physically fight, but they compete hard to get money, either from outside sources, banks and investors, or from the chief financial officer of the company. They have to justify this spending. And it's not like, we're sitting around and, as it is in government, it's not like in the private sector, with the exception of Immelt and others like him, it's not like people are just sitting there with their thumb up their asses, not trying to earn a profit, just thinking they can sell goods and services without worrying about what the competition's going to do. I mean, if there's a good project to be done in the private sector, chances are it's already being done. That is to say,
Charles, we made a major mistake.
What's that?
It's going to be Joe Biden's favorite cereal is Corn Pops.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. People. If you can make a rate of return on capital that's attractive by deploying new capital to do something in business, you're going to try to do that. So the notion that Joe Biden and Jeff Immelt, who literally by 2009 been spending 8 years destroying what was left of GE, you're going to put that idiot with another idiot in charge of a program, and then when it develops, after you've spent all this money on a lot of it on corrupt graft and stuff, when it develops that you didn't create any shovel-ready jobs, you then have a conference, you have a televised town hall meeting where you laugh about it. They literally, the two of them, laughed about, well, guess there weren't that many shovel-ready jobs. Ha, ha, ha.
Who was doing that laughing?
Obama and Immelt.
Unbelievable. And so, we used to have Jan Greenberg, right? And he was talking about the Business Roundtable, which I feel like he was mentioning Jeff Immelt. What's going on with that? There was some problems with that.
Well, so the Business Roundtable is basically a trade association. And so you have various forums where the CEOs of big companies gather and they have presentations made to them and discussions. They talk with famous people, and it's a networking opportunity. This would be, with few exceptions, the people on the board of directors and in the Business Roundtable, they're globalists. They're all for unregulated globalism. They're all for bringing in cheap labor. They're all for minimal regulation. They may at this point be behind climate change, this and that, but this is, in the main, these are not people who control their own businesses. These are managers who become very wealthy promoting unregulated globalism. And in some cases, take General Electric, at the, to the grave detriment of their shareholders. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I'm going to do it. When I called out GE as a good thing to short and actually other ways to profit from its demise, the stock was at $40 a share. I just checked and the other day, and they did a reverse split. So you've got to divide the current stock price by 8. And it's roughly, it's either $12 or $11 a share now, I think. What is it? You divide that.
Says 97.84.
Divide that by 12. Divide that by 8, it's $12. It was 40, August 31st, 2007, it was 40. And now it's 12.
So when did they do that? 8X, whatever.
I don't know. It was recently.
Must be this,
but
right?
They recalibrate the scale whenever they.
Got it.
So, but the point is, there may be some good companies in the Business Roundtable, but when I hear that the Business Roundtable wants to do X, my inkling is that that's probably a horrible thing to do.
There's a lot of definite globalists visible just in this webpage about their board of directors.
Right. In fact, you go. I see that Jamie Dimon was in there.
Yeah.
Of J.P. Morgan, and that I've been on with John Batchelor and Gordon Chang, and John's radio show, which is, he started, I think, in 2001, right before 9/11. But I've been appearing on that show since 2009, off and on. And I got a chance again to comment on Diamond's recent remarks, which I think his initial remarks were absolutely correct. He was joking around at some meeting, I think in Boston or somewhere, and somebody made a crack about the fact that the Chinese Communist Party and J.P. Morgan were the same age, roughly 100 years old. And Diamond quipped that, well, he thinks that J.P. Morgan will outlast the Chinese Communist Party. And the leader Xi and other people of the CCP in China did not like that comment. So he then walked the comment back the next day. I agree with his initial comment.
Yeah.
It's totally weak. I mean, the second, when you're in a commanding position of strength, which even under Comrade Biden and company, we still are in a much stronger state than Europe is, and I would argue than China is. I mean, Gordon has been very effective over years explaining the many weaknesses in the Chinese economy, the fact that it's very opaque. We don't know how much debt is really on that economy. And the people, in quotes, leading that operation don't really have the kind of training and institutional understanding of how to make a buck legitimately. Their approach is we'll borrow a whole bunch of money to put up a massive plant, we'll underprice our products and services, we'll drive the competition out, and in the end, we'll dominate industry after industry. Well, that's something that the Japanese tried, and it doesn't work. I mean, it's never going to work. And so we're in a place now where China's weak, and I think the cracks are showing, and certainly in Europe it's weak. In the United States, we have our problems, exacerbated, I would argue, by puppeteers who are trying to play the inherent divisions, the historical divisions, along various coordinates against one another, the African American, Native American, you name it. And with all that, today, I think we're in a much stronger position, even under this idiot and his team of idiots. And the last thing you want to do when you're in a tough competition is to say, well, I've been number one, let's say, since 1945. You could go back further than that. Well, let's just argue the U.S. has been in the top spot since 1945, and China inevitably, by the kind of math that gets you concerned about climate change, someday will be number one because it has the largest population, and let's just assume that day is coming in 20 years. So what we want to do is give up our number one position now to hope that eventual number one will treat us fairly. Well, that's absurd.
Stupid. The cracks are definitely showing, Charles.
Yeah, the crack is. Oh, by the way, I was walking past the gallery that where Hunter's paintings.
George Bourget.
Yeah, yesterday, and it didn't seem very busy yesterday at all.
I'm surprised.
In fact,
people aren't clamoring to purchase $500,000 crap.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that picture up because Miranda Devine has her book out on Tuesday, The Laptop from Hell, and as I understand it, just from reading up on it and talking to people, the process of getting a book out is an arduous process. You have lawyers reviewing its contents. If you want to have those inside comments and back cover comments of, this is the best book ever written kind of stuff, you got to get advanced publication versions of this out. And evidently those are out because excerpts are appearing in the Daily Mail and elsewhere. But this book is going to create a real firestorm, I think, when it goes broadly, and it will go broadly. And I'll buy a copy, and maybe we'll be lucky enough to get Miranda on, if possible. But this is an outrageous story. I mean, and we only know part of it now. That this knucklehead, this deviant, deeply troubled knucklehead, son, it seems, perhaps, of a deviant and deeply troubled knucklehead, would be allowed to, as he did, as Peter Schweitzer writes about, this idiot was allowed when Joe was vice president to fly all over the world on Air Force Two and be part of the entourage where you go in to see corrupt leaders around the world who are quite used to, in their own countries, trading off their positions of power to make family members rich. I mean, if our laws were enforced, we would be the exception as opposed to the rule. I mean, don't tell me that folks in China, and you pick a country, even the UK, just don't try to tell me that the leaders of these big countries, the big economies around the world, don't try to tell me there is an endemic corruption. And so here we have the Chinese, who are, I would say, I don't think they're friendly competitors. I don't see what they're doing. I mean, here we're all exercised, as we should be, about America's history through 1865 and afterwards. But you have a whole bunch of overpaid athletes. Some of them are very good, but many of them are wildly overpaid, hawking sneakers that are made using slave labor in China. So you're selling overpriced things that could be made here, using machines perhaps, and you're suggesting to people who are not, let's say, all that wealthy, that they ought to spend $300-500 or whatever it costs for these LeBron James endorsed sneakers. And we're supposed to listen to him? I mean, I watch him play basketball. It's impressive to watch him play basketball. I do not give a shit what he says about economics.
I feel that way about basketball.
No, basketball could be fun to watch.
Wait a minute. Why is he 23? I thought Michael Jordan was 23.
Different team.
Oh, he's just trying to... Anyway.
But
he's got a Boulay tattoo on his chest. That's for another show.
Well, the thing of it is, it's not... when we think about, you're going to have the NBA and the NFL and these other sports teams back Black Lives Matter without thinking through the fact that slavery around the world existed during George W. Bush's time, but with the dread events across the Middle East, the so-called Arab Spring and all that in Benghazi, thanks to Barack Obama's administration, and in spite of the fact that Donald Trump wasn't able to, I think, redress many of these problems, we have open slave markets in Benghazi, open air slave markets. We have in Afghanistan, we have stories leaking out of families with no money to eat. So to cure the problem of feeding their family, they're selling their daughters. They sold, according to one account, one guy sold a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old or something like that, and is thinking about whether he needs to sell a 7-year-old daughter. In theory, in marriage, so he can get food for the remaining of people of his family. We're supposed to listen to these knuckleheads? I mean, you can't inflame the streets and the shopping malls and across this country, with talk about, Black lives don't matter in this country, but do everything that the Biden family is doing, and others, the Bush family and other powerful elites, to make China and the Chinese Communist Party even stronger. You can't argue both sides of the coin, at least to me, and win.
Indeed. And I'm with you on, I mean, I don't care what any of these professional athletes say, certainly not about politics, maybe about basketball. Now, Charles, there was also this article here from Wayne Allen Root advising us to get ready for President Hillary Clinton. I guess you should have a lot of toilet tissue and plastic around the house. How do you get ready for that?
Well, I'll just finish one point you were making. I think the way to pronounce athlete, the kind of athlete that you were talking about there, is slightly different. I think it's pronounced athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, Wayne Allen Root is a good person with a lot of experience. Actually, I think he was a professional. I don't know if he was a professional gambler or odds maker or whatever, but he's pretty astute when it comes to making predictions and thinking through issues. Here, I think, however, he's wrong. And why I would say that, and I'm not going to say who this person is, but in the process of speaking to the top people at the Obama Foundation, I had lengthy meetings with one of the top money raisers for Obama, who told me that, I won't say exact, I don't want to violate exactly the confidence of what he told me, but he said, listen, you should stop assuming that the Obamas and the Clintons are close. They're not. And, Obama has his own brand. It's a global brand now. It's made them worth hundreds of millions of dollars with more to come. And the last thing Barack Obama wants to do is to see Hillary Clinton in his shoes back in the White House, because we know what will happen. You know, if you go and you read, there's a book I think called The War Room. There are multiple books about the 1992 campaign that talk about the Clintons' pioneering use of a war room, of an enemies list, and really kicking ass and taking names, figuring out everybody who might get in the way of their quest for power, and either buying them off or, you know, keeping them down on the farm, let's just say.
Rubbing them out.
Oh, I don't want to go that far. I mean, you know, I'm not saying that they themselves did that, but certainly people who saw advantage in clearing a path for Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton may have been responsible for a lot of suspicious activities.
They know a lot of people who have committed suicide, Charles, and I mean a lot.
Yeah. So the point being here that I don't think, I actually think Root is right about the fact that the moneyed people are sitting here and they are terrified of the early returns in these special elections and the polls. And by going hard left at the same time that you turn this economy into dive mode, you know, dive into the shithole mode, is not exactly a way to win votes legitimately. So I think that the money behind the Democratic Party, and there's certainly hard left people who have a lot of money in the Democratic Party, but the real money is more moderate. They're looking at this and saying, you know, we can see defeat. You know, defeat is in our cards here, in our future. So we got to get out of it. We got to at least get back to stall speed. You know, we can't go in a dive bomb 200 miles an hour or whatever the speed would be into the ground. We got to get this plane at least back up in neutral and then craft a solution here. And that solution cannot involve Joe Biden. I mean, he's been wrong about so many things. Now we have the laptop from hell, and we'll have more stories like that probably being pushed out by Kamala and accentuated by Republicans. So I think the Biden brand is going to be permanently, as it were, stained, kind of like the Clinton brand. And
it's like his shorts.
Exactly.
On the Pope visit.
And his bed sheets, probably. But anyway, that's going to be...
Defeat don't fail me now, Charles.
And yeah, we'll probably have him a celebrity endorser for the Pens, you know, when he leaves. But anyway, and there are a lot of ads like that now out for adult diapers on Fox. And other channels. But anyway,
you know, I meant to mention this to you. I've been seeing Fox the past couple of days. Mike Lindell is back on there. I'm sick of that moron. But I thought he was banning Fox and all this.
Let's not even talk about him. I mean, he doesn't deserve airtime. The Pillow is a piece of crap. The Giza sheets are a joke. His company's a joke. And I think he's he's a scam artist. Yeah. And his foundation is a scam. And, you know, we shouldn't give him airtime. We're going to take Hillary Clinton's suggestion and use it. I'll be the gatekeeper. We'll shut the gate on his face.
One interesting thing, I'm not promoting this, but I found it interesting that President Trump has released, I guess this is like a holiday gift. It's kind of a book of photos where he has captioned them. And I was watching the news last night and they went through some of the captions. I mean, it's basically a book of Trump tweets about his photos. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I bet you we could quickly gin up a similar funny book about what he was really thinking.
I might get this.
Yeah.
Whoa, wait a minute. Holy crap, it's a lot of money.
How much?
Wow. $75 and then $229 to get it signed. That's a lot, Trump.
That not really. If it's a first edition, I mean, it tends to run. It's probably certainly in the hundreds of thousands,
But, you know, Charles, people can become sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth on subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth for only a fraction of that price.
Well, maybe you need to do your book now. Then you can sell your book for, say, half.
I think, yeah, if Trump can sell books for $75, I could sell them for maybe less.
Yeah. But anyway, so Wayne is saying that Hillary, we need to get ready for Hillary. I don't think that's a thing. I mean, Uma has a book out, and she was all over various and sundry talk shows. I watched a bit of her on MSNBC, and I have to say that, you know, she, on one level, she's very elegant and poised, and she speaks English well, unlike Biden and many other people. And she's very gracious, perhaps too gracious, to Anthony Weiner in this book and in the interviews. But she's a liar. I mean, she's a bold liar. And it's very dangerous to have somebody who's glib and poised and articulate and put them out there, and you get sucked in, and you say, oh, yeah, well, she's so gracious to this man who abused her and her family and humiliated her, and if she can turn the other cheek, so can I, that kind of stuff. But anyway, in the interview that I watched with just a horrible, fake former Republican, Nicole Wallace, whose voice is grating, her style, she speaks MSNBC, you know, cadence, and any Republican is evil, and any guest she likes is noble, and it's nauseating listening to her. But she was talking to Uma, and she asked Uma, did she feel guilty about the laptop from hell and its potential influence on the 2016 election. The fact that Comey reopened the investigation October 28th, 2016, was a very, Hillary had a lot of, she had the big momentum going into that election. And then Comey reopens the investigation, and people like me and others who are watching say, well, geez, if he closed it in July, now he's opening it. And remember, the original theory was, and we've done multiple shows on this, and there's an FBI
you mean the
vault.
Weiner laptop from hell, the original laptop from hell.
Right. Dueling laptops from hell. So
they got that one to kind of go away, didn't they?
Well, I don't know if you can pull up the FBI vault, 1 or 2 page memo on the Weiner laptop, but it's crystal clear from that memo and from other reporting that Comey, as usual, lied. You know, they did not do. Is that like a 1 or 2 page thing? I can't. It's very small on my screen.
Part 1 of 1, FBI.
Yeah, this is the one. You pull that up, and that's an internal memo. You should be able to read the memo. You used to be able to.
Yeah, download it because it's going to be very difficult to deal with on this.
Okay, but our viewers can at their leisure read this.
There it is.
And I don't see. Yeah, there we go. And you'll be able to see, the viewers, when you read it carefully, that this is a cover your ass memo from somebody, I think, within the FBI, who notes that they had this memo, and that basically the memo was, the laptop was obtained in an investigation that was looking into the child sex aspects of Weiner, not into the Clinton Foundation, not into things that are perhaps extremely interesting and on that laptop. And what the memo says is that we saw things that mentioned Hillary Clinton or whatever, but we didn't look at them. We explicitly didn't look at them, and I want this to be a memo to the file. There are other memos that explain that only a small fraction of the emails were searched, and they weren't searched aggressively. You know, you can search, I gather, you can search electronic documents, and you can use search terms that will likely exclude the things you want to find. And that, in essence, is what they did. And Uma gets up there and says, well, she was very gratified that in this process, when the laptop, the Weiner laptop from hell surfaced, that she was eager to tell her side of the story. And besides, in the end, she was gratified that when they went through it, Comey concluded that the emails on this Weiner laptop were all duplicates of what they'd already found. That is not true. And she said that on air, and that's a bold-faced lie. From there, she went on to make the contention, when I was watching, that, you know, she's very unhappy that Trump won, because had Hillary been president, she said, there wouldn't have been a COVID crisis. There wouldn't have been the
she
COVID.
Might be right.
Yeah, there would have nuclear winter.
Well, it could have come from a lab. You know?
Right.
That's amazing that she said that, Charles. I mean, isn't that a tongue-in-cheek suggestion of some perhaps deliberate?
It's MSNBC. What do you expect? I mean, it's just absurd questions and even crazier answers. Then she also said, and as far as the debacle in Afghanistan, the rushed exit from Afghanistan, Abedin claimed that when Biden arrived, there was no plan. The Trump people had no plan together, and they committed to that exit date. And because of that, the Biden was hobbled. He was left in a position where he had no alternative but to give away $85 billion worth of American goods and rush out military equipment, and then rush out, leaving behind Americans and our allies, and damaging our international prestige. And also, I mean, Biden committed harakiri with that exercise. And if you recall at the time, that moron who used to work for Hillary Clinton, Jake Sullivan, who on one level, if you look at his resume, he's got an impressive set of awards and accomplishments and this and that. But as far as his career in politics, he's a moron. Gets up there before we leave in Afghanistan and says, we've considered every scenario and these refugees are all vetted. Now it's leaking out that nobody was vetted. And of course, that makes sense. You can't, it's like people were talking about, you're going to vet the Syrian refugees. Okay. If there are no records in Syria of these people, these aren't people who are, many of them who streamed out of Syria and out of Afghanistan. These are not people who've been participating in society, who have a birth certificate, who have the equivalent of Social Security, who may or may not have a criminal record or can prove where they went to. That's not the way it is over there. So the idea that you're going to do the kind of vetting that should have been done, frankly, to Obama and to George W. Bush and to many people who go into the electoral fold and win elections and then earn the right to direct traffic without actually having their own backgrounds checked closely enough. So this is a series of very dangerous lies being sold to people who are interested in being gulled. And now we get set up for the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, which is going to be quite interesting. So we have the laptop from hell, the Miranda Devine book. We have echoes of the Wiener laptop from hell, and now we have the saga of this trial that's going on starting tomorrow. And the great Katja Bainova has this story out that solicited your views and my views, and we disagree, I think, on some of them. But this is clearly something that should be investigated. I'm seeing reporting that in federal trials, it is customary that they not be televised, but in state-level trials, depending on the state and the locality, they can be. So, but there's more recent reporting out just before we went on air suggesting that visitors are not even going to be allowed into the trial room, which is interesting.
The public will not be allowed, you mean?
Yeah, right. Normally the public is allowed.
Yes, because the courts are supposed to be a public forum and this kind of star chamber sort of thing. I mean, Charles, I just want people to consider a couple of things. I don't want to make this a show about Ghislaine Maxwell, but I've spent a lot of time going over the decades-long relationship between her father, Robert Maxwell, and Rupert Murdoch. I've recently been tying things related to Robert Maxwell going back to the Son of Sam case. Mm-hmm. And we know that Rupert Murdoch came from Australia to the United States to purchase the New York Post at the height of the Son of Sam murders, before David Berkowitz was arrested, put out a lot of stories that impacted the flow of the case, even had an impact on what David Berkowitz said, his ongoing testimony. And we see similar things happening now with Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein being dragged out of the Manhattan Detention Center, or whatever it's called, on the gurney. That was only published in the New York Post, or it was broken in the New York Post. So it's interesting to see how the New York Post has been controlling these stories. And remember, I think it was must have been August 2019 that Ghislaine Maxwell was at that In-N-Out hamburger restaurant, also exclusive to the New York Post. People were very focused on the Photoshop manipulations of ads and posters in the background, feeling that had some sort of significance. But to me, particularly now that Ghislaine Maxwell has been incarcerated and been on trial for so long, and we haven't seen her other than courtroom sketches. Really, the last and most recent public photograph we've seen of her is a heavily retouched photo of somebody potentially at the In-N-Out hamburger restaurant. And to me, this is a form of photo identity duplexing, where the public is now not exactly clear on what she looks like. And even if we were allowed into that courtroom, somebody with a short, cropped, black haircut looks like her and has a medical mask on the whole time. Would her close friends even be able to recognize her in that condition? Hard to say.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is that I think here you have the interesting nexus of Israeli, UK, Australian, French government interests and national, intelligence service interests, having operated, I'm not saying in cahoots, but over decades. And, we watched, in the case of the Clinton Foundation, we reached the conclusion that there is no way the major intelligence agencies failed to see the corruption and fraud in the Clinton Foundation. There's just no way. You have to be able, if we can do it, you and I can do it with our private resources. Folks who can get bank account numbers, who can tap phones and intimidate people or whatever, arrest people, had to have known that for decades, the Clinton Foundation, like other crooked, leaky, fake foundations, many based in the UK, some based elsewhere, in Canada, Australia, they had to know all this. And so this is a trial that, to get to the bottom of things, should implicate quite a few people. At the very least, when we think about Ghislaine Maxwell, her various, she was arrested or served, I guess, at the Clinton Global Initiative in either 2009 or 10 for her role, I think, with Terramar Foundation, which is the fake foundation, the Terramar Project, supposedly trying to scoop plastic out of the seas and stuff. She's been involved with multiple fake foundations tied to the Clintons. The Terramar Foundation made, I think, a commitment to action at the Clinton Global Initiative. If you're really digging into this, there's an intersection here between what Durham should be doing and what this trial is all about. And the idea of using fake foundations as a means to trade money for influence, maybe in both directions, is quite an old idea. It didn't get its start with a foundation that was set up to fund the Iran-Contra project. It started much earlier than that. So it could be, Jason. I mean, we don't have to guess about what's going to happen with the trial. Hopefully, we're going to find out the trial's going to happen, and she's either going to survive the process and be acquitted, or survive the process and found guilty, or not survive the process. And we'll see what happens.
I have a very, very strong feeling that something extremely stupid is going to happen. But this is an interesting logo for the Terramar Project. It reminds me of something I've seen before. You know who this is, right, Charles?
Barack Obama.
Yeah, baby B-Rock, wearing this weird medallion that, I don't know, for some reason this looks similar to me. I'm very interested in symbols and things like that. And she's been given speeches about this Terramar Project. There was something else I wanted to ask you about this. Fox a couple days ago had this story about Prince Andrew accusations excluded from the trial. So that is interesting. They decided not to bring charges in connection with Virginia Giuffre. I don't know if we've seen too many details as to why that is.
Well, I think I was asked to comment about that. Forget who. My recollection is that Virginia Giuffre has over time changed her story a lot, and so perhaps the people. I mean, this is actually, dare I say, this is a good example of why grand jury deliberations need to be held confidential,
right?
Because witnesses can get all cleaned up and can make a case, Jussie Smollett as an example, that inflames passions, and we're inclined to believe that he was right, and then it turns out he made the whole thing up. And so the area of sexual abuse, particularly of minors, is it's a very horrible facet of the human experience, and the people who perpetuate it need to be identified and severely punished. But equally, there are cases where people make false claims, and those are every bit as bad, actually.
Well, and the other thing is, that article was saying that the allegations are coming from a time in her life when she was 17 or 18. And depending on where in the United States or wherever in the world that occurred, she may not be considered, that could be the age of consent.
Yeah, I actually don't know the details of that case as well as I'd like so, but I think the only thing I can conclude is that a combination of pressure from the palace and the state of the evidence led, and I think we're talking here about American prosecutors, to say, this shouldn't be a priority. Let's instead focus on Ghislaine.
Well, I come back to my really strong feeling that there's been something screwy going on with all of these civil trials surrounding everybody who knows Jeffrey Epstein. And there are some people who I have told to F themselves, who I think have been messing with this with the specific intention of getting things like that to happen. Like just whatever happens with this trial, protecting Andrew, protecting Bill Clinton, they don't really care what happens. And I just have a very strong feeling that somebody who looks a lot like Ghislaine Maxwell might be trotted out of somewhere on a gurney and published in the New York Post, and then that's the end of the trial. That's what I'm anticipating.
Well, I will say that Epstein's involvement with the Clintons it goes way back before 2002. And this is not something I'm prepared to go into great depth today on, but there are various and sundry foundations that were set up before Bill and Hillary were in the White House, and then another one while they were there, where private contributors were encouraged to give money to help fund the extraordinary expenses of, say, redecorating the Oval Office or fumigating the room next to the Oval Office, or after Bill got done with Monica in it, or other projects like that. And when you set up these one of them is called the White House Historical Society. One of them is called something like the White House Endowment and Acquisition Trust. And you could set up one of these things to do it properly in D.C., where obviously if it's a White House related thing, it would be based. You have to register in Washington, D.C. You have to file in Washington, D.C. And then you have to jump through the hoops that you should have had to jump through the hoops for the Clinton Foundation when they were directing the activities of the Clinton Foundation in the White House. And Epstein and Ghislaine, apparently, Epstein made a small contribution for him, then $10,000 or something, to either the Historical Association or the Endowment Trust. And in exchange for that, or in recognition of that, Epstein and Ghislaine got invited to some reception in the White House where they shook hands with Bill and Hillary, and they were there's some correspondence back and forth thanking Epstein for his $10,000 contribution. So as a guest, Epstein didn't first meet Bill Clinton in 2002 when he squired Clinton and a bunch of crazy actors, including Kevin Spacey, around the world on Epstein 727. If you were to do the type of investigation that should be done, there's the picture. I don't know if there's a date on that picture, but there he is. And who's the person in the lower left?
I don't know, laughing in the background. Maybe someone will notice or recognize him. This is from The Sun, which, by the way, you know who publishes The Sun, Charles?
Rupert Murdoch.
Yes. Prez and pervert. Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, and President Clinton smile together in never-before-seen images. This is published April 2021. Never-before-seen images obtained by The Sun on Sunday can be published for the first time following the heiress's court appearance on Friday. Ghislaine Maxwell watches as Jeffrey Epstein and U.S. President Bill Clinton shake hands. Here's what she looks like today.
Oh, look at the credit. William J. Clinton,
that's from
President.
Whoa!
Yeah. And by the way, there is no such thing as the William J. Clinton Presidential Library. There's no such organization in Arkansas or anywhere else.
Huh. this comes from the presidential library as well. I wonder what else they have about Epstein.
I can't see the type because it's really small on this computer right now, but I think there may be a description of the date when this occurred at the bottom of the picture.
Nope.
No, okay. But I think this was something that happened around 1998. It obviously happened before January 20th, 2001. So it therefore happened before 2002, September, when he went around Africa with Epstein.
Right.
And then,
but look at the look on Epstein's face in this picture. He's thinking, he seems captivated by Clinton, and I don't think that's in a romantic sense. He's just thinking about what he could do with this level of influence.
Right. And when we see that letter that was written by the two lawyers, and was it 2007, seeking leniency for Epstein? The lawyer's name? Was it Lefkowitz or something like that? Or
Lefcourt.
And it might be in your memory or whatever, because we had it up beforehand. But the point is,
it's a different computer.
You know, in my experience, when you're trying to convince somebody who sits in judgment, you know, can decide the outcome of what's going to happen, and you're facing a penalty, generally not the best idea to lie, particularly in a way that it could be proven that you're lying. So in this letter, seeking leniency for his sex offenses, I think it's Lefcourt, and I think, does Dershowitz also sign that letter?
Yes, he does. That's what I spoke to Dershowitz about, and he got very interested when I asked him about that.
But there are a series of provable lies in the letter. One, that Epstein played a pivotal role in creating the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, and another that he was centrally involved in the Clinton Global Initiative. I mean, there are no charities that were legitimately created. Yeah, and that's that's a story by Malia Zimmerman, I think, right?
Who was very oddly tied in with controversy related to Seth Rich, lawsuits pertaining to what was that detective's name?
No,
I forget his name.
This is that letter, though, that we were talking about. What's the date of it? July 5th, 6th, 2007? July
6th, 2007.
So
Hillary's by Federal Express.
So Hillary's in the presidential primary, deep in getting ready for the presidential primary. And Epstein is in deep, deep shit. And had the electorate discovered, the Democratic electorate discovered the true state of the Clinton Foundation in primary season, then Barack Obama would have swept to an even more commanding lead sooner in 2008 than he did. So if John Durham is doing his work, which maybe he is and maybe he isn't, what you would want to be doing is going back into this and saying, now, wait a minute, what was the true state of the Clinton Foundation on July 6, 2007? Answer, they were lying to donors around the world, and in particular, lying to the governments of the UK, France, Norway, and others to get a fuckload of money out of this thing called Unitaid, which was set up in September 2006 illegally to, in theory, take money from governments and travel passengers and send it to existing organizations, i.e. the Clinton Foundation. But in this case, it was to go to the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, which didn't exist on July 6, 2007. And the principle behind it was that Unitaid was it got started very late in the evolution of charities. You didn't really need a Unitaid. So the principle was that the money was only going to go to the desperately poor countries, certainly not to, maybe fund Hillary Clinton's political campaigns and Bill Clinton's extravagant post-presidential lifestyle with his daughter. That's one piece. And the second piece, it was only supposed to go to organizations that already existed and that had already sized up and were paying for the overhead for these projects. And this was just going to top up and take a project that was already financed and double, triple, quadruple, quintuple the impact by keeping the overhead the same level and funneling a lot more money. Neither of those things were true. And in 2007, there was no, the paperwork for the Clinton Foundation at all times, but in particular in 2007, was a disaster. So here on the one hand, they're lying about the state of the Clinton Foundation to multiple people. She's running for a political office. They're getting cover somehow from the IRS. The IRS should have shut this thing down in 2007. And regarding Epstein, they're putting him on ice. They're getting him out of the way, getting him on home release or whatever he had. And the second line HIV treatment is the Clinton Foundation. That's cooperating with global oxygen suppliers is what they're going to have to do with Joe Biden if they're not already doing that to keep him alive. But
yeah.
Anyway, Jason, I'm noticing on my screen that it's getting pretty dark.
Maybe flip on the light.
Give me 1 second. I'm just going to move away
victims
from
of what do you call it?
Sorry.
Daylight savings time. So I'm trying to find a high resolution version of that letter so we can read the whole thing. I feel like we have seen it with Alan Dershowitz's signature on it and everything.
Oh yeah, it's a lengthy letter.
But that's just a piece of it in the Fox article, and it's hard to find. Let me try.
Yeah, we had it before. Let's not do it right now unless we can do it rapidly. But we've gone through it before, and the claims that are made are wrong. And my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that if you make a contention to a judge individually without a lawyer, that's one way of doing it. But if you ask a lawyer to write a letter making claims about Epstein, those claims better be accurate, right? Because a lawyer should not be lying, facilitating the transmission of false claims.
I would actually offer that you'd be better off having a lawyer lie for you in court, because I'm learning quite a bit about the debate in the legal community of zealous defense versus what kind of lying the court cares about. So it might be strategically wise, if you knew you had to lie, to have a lawyer do it for you.
Right. But, when we think about Epstein and we think about, what he was doing, we hear the pathetic defense that Bill Gates tried to use. He said, the reason I met with him is he came to me and said he might be able to source more donors for my various projects. And I'm like, dude, at that time, you were the richest person in the world. You were having trouble finding places to put your money, which is why you wasted it, in quotes, on the Clinton Foundation. The last thing you needed was more money to try to deploy. So don't try to tell me that you, the co-founder of Microsoft, having operated one of the largest, not the largest, charity in the world, that you needed help from anybody, let alone some schlub who has never been able, while he was alive, to demonstrate or explain how he managed to get the various positions that he mangled over time, and has never really made true and accurate reporting about any aspect of his supposed philanthropic and personal operations. So you didn't, if you had a third-rate security person try to decide whether or not you should meet with Jeff Epstein, somebody who got scraped through security classes with a 70% average, even that person would say, you can't meet with this guy. One of his major jobs before he set up J. Epstein Trust or whatever was working in a Ponzi scheme where the guy he was raising money for Ponzi scheme went to prison for 18 years. I mean, how do you... Steve Hoffenberg, who, by the way, didn't he own Hoffenberg?
New York Post.
Right.
He saved it somehow. It was interesting, Charles. I saw Bill Gates yesterday or so. It was Meet the Press. Maybe it was this morning. He was like, I'm surprised. All these conspiracy theories think I'm some kind of evil mastermind. It was the most ridiculous, obvious, uncomfortable lying I've seen in at least a few hours.
Yeah. Yeah. So So back then, though, on this whole question, we remember that there's a chapter here that's important to understand, and that is that Harvard, with all of its history and power, got into a terrible state through the internet bubble where they overexpanded under Larry Summers, and the value of their endowment crashed, but their commitments remained outstanding to buy real estate, expensive real estate and construct facilities. So they really needed to raise money. And Dershowitz was, you have had personal experience with him. I have not. He doesn't strike me as a particularly attractive individual, but amongst the Harvard crowd, the story was, here's one of the youngest ever full professors. He became a tenured professor at Harvard Law School before he was 30. All these high profile things he's been involved with over time. And he's, quick. He's always writing books about subjects and speaking and debating and this and that. He's saleable to the Harvard community, in particular to the big donor Harvard community. So he's useful.
Certainly popular among those who have a need to kill their wives.
You mean von Bülow you're talking about there? Yeah, but
von Bülow himself.
Yeah, well, I don't think we should say that he killed his wife. I mean, his wife did.
He maybe drove her to suicide. Let him sue me. He's, I didn't say he killed her, but anyway, I'm happy to have Alan Dershowitz.
His first wife. But anyway, the thing that is true, if you're sitting there and you're trying to figure out, who the big dollar potential donors are to Harvard in 2002, that's a heady discussion to have with the president of Harvard if you're Epstein, right? Because you're saying to Larry Summers, look, I can help you, get to Les Wexner, I can help you do this, I can help you do that, it's your Bill Gates. And if you're Larry Summers, who I think was at least at the Epstein townhouse, it may have been elsewhere, you got some explaining to do. Gates has some explaining to do. Frankly, Jess Staley has some explaining to do. Dershowitz has some explaining to do. This is not the way you typically raise big money. You do this particularly if you're a brand name. I mean, Harvard is not. I mean, I don't particularly like it all that much, but you can't say that Harvard is some, like Salesforce.com. I mean, this thing has been around for a while. There are a lot of very famous and influential graduates and donors. Some families have been giving money to this place since, its founding, its official founding in 1650-ish. So the project of raising more money is a project that should be involved. You go to your past donors. I mean, I'll give you a vignette. When I went to a dinner announcing the launch of a recent campaign for Harvard Business School, the target was $1 billion. Now you can ask, why do you need another $1 billion for Harvard Business School? But at that dinner, the launch of the official supposed launch of the campaign, the dean gets up and said, well, we're delighted to announce that we're launching the campaign today, and we've already raised $750 million. That gives you a sense of how loyal donors are or were to different aspects of Harvard. You don't need some guy who never went to college, who may have gotten kicked out of Bear Stearns, who certainly was involved with the Ponzi schemer, and then has been engaged in highly questionable activities. You do not insert him into the mix, but yet they did that. So why did they do that? Why was Epstein allowed to have office space? Was it at Harvard or MIT? Why was he interacting with these various professors who in some cases were Nobel Prize winning in hard science type professors who in theory know what they're talking about? What the hell were they doing going to Epstein's townhouse? What was Leon Black doing in all this? He's a lethally shrewd investor. Why would somebody who had until recently covered himself in glory, making billions of dollars, why would you ever pay a schlub like Epstein the amount of money that this guy supposedly paid Epstein for, quote, financial advisory services? It just doesn't make any sense.
The most interesting explanation that I've heard, Charles, came from Eric Weinstein on a Lex Friedman podcast, where he said that it was widely known that if you were doing something truly innovative that for whatever reason couldn't be financed by mainstream resources, Jeffrey Epstein was the guy to go to. So it's always caused me to wonder what sort of sinister research these guys might have been interested in doing. Of course, Charles Lieber was there. He's now been indicted with the Chinese nationals. Anybody says anything about this and Dershowitz sues. Of course, Dershowitz lies about whoever he wants to suppress, but when you tell the truth about him, he sues you.
Well, in the case of that statement you just made or somebody made about Epstein, it's just garbage. It's just garbage. I mean, the
Weinstein
biggest...
said it.
I don't care who, I don't even know who Weinstein is. I'm just saying that is a garbage comment, because when you get around the big money, the big shrewd investors, they're all eager to identify the next frontier.
I think it's illegal stuff he was talking about.
Well, again, that's not so when you want to do something that's really complex and illegal, get Epstein. I mean, that's not a strong recommendation for Epstein, and that's for putting him in prison. And again, so people like the fraudster community. I remember when I set up a firm when I was 38, and I thought I was accomplished and wise beyond my years and stuff. Fraudsters came out of the woodwork. Cockroaches from around the world came to my office with stories that seemed interesting, and then you check them out and they're garbage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and we weren't, we had a very high profile of people behind us with a lot of money, but we weren't in a position ourselves to write billion-dollar checks. If you're Bill Gates and you can easily write $1 billion check,
why do you need
think
any
of the
investor?
number of people who are trying to beat a path to your door with, Elizabeth Holmes Theranos style stories. These things do get financed, and the shrewd people who've managed to keep on their money, they make sure that these hucksters don't get a chance to pitch this garbage. So this is further what you just said, that what Weinstein said further corroborates my view that this a lot of people should have known a long time ago that Epstein was a crook. Why didn't they turn him in? And I think there's a bad answer. The bad answer is that Epstein was able to corrupt them.
Right. I think that's right.
Yeah. And there is mention in the Sputnik article on Ghislaine. I used the phrase Sloan Ranger, which you had not heard about, and thought it should be Lone Ranger. England, the UK was the economy was quite depressed. The government had a very high percentage of ownership interest across the economy in the early 1980s. And then it began to open up under, I guess it was Thatcher, into the Thatcher and Reagan duo period. And suddenly a lot of people, some well-connected like Ghislaine Maxwell and some not so well-connected, began to be quite wealthy and began to spend a lot of money. And it was the spoiled brat, connected rich people who were characterized as being Sloan Rangers. Sloane Square is a portion of London that's quite ritzy, actually. And so it was people would hang around there in the fancy restaurants and shops and drinking champagne at lunch, that kind of. Those are Sloan Rangers. And that's, I would argue, what Ghislaine Maxwell was at one point when her father was alive and with money. And then afterwards, she was a fallen devil. I wouldn't say she was a fallen angel, but she always lived high in the hog. I don't know how smart she is. I would guess she's not completely stupid.
I think she's pretty educated, right? She speaks French and probably Hebrew, and she can drive a submarine and a helicopter. I mean, she's certainly resourceful.
Right. And, we Americans, myself included, are suckers for an English accent. And so you have a cultured English accent giving you opinions about this and that, who happens to be on a first name basis with Prince Andrew and can get you in this party and that party and this club. She's going to make progress, particularly among American investors. And
she was pretty when she was young.
Yeah. But, and I gather also she's got a number of siblings who are some not so, some smart, some well-connected, some not with, some accomplished, some not so accomplished.
Well, they had that whole Magellan software thing and all kinds of software stuff. What was it? Not Prism. It's escaping me right now, but there's all kinds of stuff they were involved in.
Yeah. But so anyway, I think this will take a lot of attention in the coming weeks, certainly. we should talk a bit about, just perhaps at a 30,000 feet level, about the latest lockdown rumors. I think the initial reaction was a very bad day in the market on Friday. Some attributed that to people saying, oh no, there's going to be another lockdown. And I think reporting over the weekend is coming to the conclusion. The governor of New York is very far ahead of herself. I mean, we are getting reports now from South Africa and others saying that, yeah, there's this new thing, but it's not that bad so far. And to immediately go into a zone where we need to lock the world down again, before we really assess, this far into, or this many months past 15 days to stop the spread, we should be doing some serious naval contemplation of what did people say was going to happen, what actually did happen, who is actually suffering now. Is it, as some of the airheads in mainstream media, I repeat myself, is this a crisis of the unvaccinated hurting the vaccinated, or is it the reverse? I mean, we need to have credible, objective scientists, if there are any left, look at this evidence. And I would say, from what I've seen so far, I don't see the argument justifying another lockdown.
Well, this article in Reuters is quoting a South African doctor who is saying that the patients with the Omicron variant have very mild symptoms. We did an episode with John Cullen on Friday. People can still see that on Subscribestar and Patreon, where he was showing these different variants. There was an important point that was raised, Charles, because early in the reporting, they said South Africa. Then they said Southern Africa, that it came from Botswana. There's a doctor from South Africa who was, I think the health minister, was very upset, saying that it was identified in South Africa by doctors in South Africa, and reiterating that South Africa has one of the most sophisticated medical systems in the world. I don't know if viewers realize this, but the first human-to-human heart transplant was done in South Africa. So there's a lot of epidemiology, a lot of research going on there. I mean, I think that obviously Africa has a unique ecology and therefore unique viruses and diseases. And so people who are interested in epidemiology, it's a good place to study it.
Well, and in addition, you bring up another excellent point, that it was in August of 2003 that the South African health authorities raised the red flag about Ranbaxy adulterated HIV/AIDS medicines. It was South Africa who first identified that, using a French, I think a French doctor, I'm not sure where he was based, realized that was the case. August of 2003, at a time when who was leading the push to promote Ranbaxy and other products to fight HIV and AIDS? I think you'll remember that it was Dr. Fauci. And Deborah Birx and others, and of course the Clinton Foundation.
Dr. Fauci was on some show I was looking at where they were asking him questions. You know, he said, well, you know, Rand Paul, that's just theater. And he was laughing. He was mocking anyone who questioned him, and suggested, you know, because the interviewer had said that Ted Cruz said that Dr. Fauci should be in prison. And Fauci said, what happened on January 6th, Senator Cruz? And I'm thinking, what the hell does that have to do with you having a reputation and long history of suppressing drugs in the HIV community that were known to work, while promoting expensive patented drugs that were more experimental? It's amazing this guy is able to, and it didn't work.
Well, yeah, we need to remember in some of this that the biggest contributors to political campaigns are pharmaceutical companies. Among the biggest are pharmaceutical companies, global pharmaceutical companies, one way or another. And they're also massive. If you watch mainstream media, you'll see massive advertisements across print, media, radio, even social media now, coming from pharmaceutical and medical companies.
Yeah.
And this is this is an area where politicians, particularly presidents, who then put people in to some of these health authorities and cabinet level positions and regulators or whatever, they could literally decide who wins and who loses when it comes to a given drug or treatment.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It was a pretty recent development that you were even allowed to advertise pharmaceutical drugs on television. I'm not sure exactly when that came about, but, think about all the industries that affects, because, there's going to be actors, directors, crew members making the commercials, television stations getting money from having the commercials. I mean, at this point, depending on what you watch, it seems like all of it is pharmaceutical ads.
Yeah, and that book by Catherine Eban, Bottle of Lies, which is right behind the camera of the TV right now, of my iPad. It's a great book to read. Doesn't quite go far enough, but think of the title, Bottle of Lies. And it gets into the false claims and the dangerous consequences that, in particular, makers of generic pharmaceuticals have thrust upon the world, and what that's going to do ultimately to populations in vulnerable parts of the world, particularly across the African continent. So if you think back, we have the Saul Alinsky surface level, in quotes, thinking that during Thanksgiving, people were saying, of course, we're celebrating the date that colonialists came and destroyed indigenous peoples by killing animals. Of course, we're going to celebrate that, mocking people who are trying to get together and celebrate what I think is a good, perhaps a very nice holiday. There is the story, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, that some colonists distributed smallpox-laden blankets to Indians, and that caused the destruction. That was intentional, that caused the destruction of indigenous peoples. I think it's mostly dealing in South America, but I could be wrong on all that. Now, I don't know what actually happened, but let's get some of these medical geniuses to study the history. If we could recreate the 1918 virus by going up to Alaska and digging up something, there ought to be a record. It ought to be possible with all our highfalutin scientists and institutes to figure out, is that a myth? Is it just the case that the people who had been isolated over in Europe, when they came and interacted with people who have been isolated here on this continent and in South America, that the people in South America and America just weren't ready for something that we had conquered in Europe, and it was accidental, or was it purposive? Let's get to the bottom of what really happened. If there's some evil genius, Dr. Fauci's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather who came up with this idea, well, let's call that person out. But let's get to the truth of that.
Yeah. I wonder, Charles, I know Crowdsource the Truth viewers who watch John Cullen Investigates are aware of that resurrection of the 1918 Spanish flu. But I wonder if viewers of Sunday with Charles are aware. And I mean, this is, it's the type of thing that people hear, and it's whoever is at YouTube gets an itchy strike finger when we talk about it. But I'm just talking about what the CDC is publishing on their website. They're saying there was a reconstruction of the 1918 influenza pandemic virus, and it involved a 2005 approximately mission to Alaska, where they dug up people who had died from the Spanish flu and scraped their lungs and got genetic material and used genetic sequencing to reconstruct it. I have just recently learned, I think John might have told me this the other day, that Science magazine would not publish this story unless they would put the gene sequence for the Spanish flu into the public domain. Jeez. And I don't know if you realize this, Charles, but you can buy a gene sequencer. It's kind of like a 3D printer. You just load it up with like amino acids. There's like 4 things or something that you put in it, and then it can make anything. So you could make this virus, certainly if you're Wuhan, China, or some billionaire crazy person. It's amazing to think about what people could do.
Well, I wonder if this was a 2005 project. I wonder if that involved the firm that we were talking to, the Peter Daszak's thing.
Echo Health Alliance.
Yeah, Echo Health Alliance, its predecessor. But it sounds like the kind of thing Echo Health Alliance might like to do, or Fauci might like to fund. Let's go put sandflies into some dogs and cut their vocal cords because we want to hear them barking, and do it in Tunisia where it's really nice and hot and there's sand everywhere, and see what happens. Let's do that. I mean, that is just diabolical crap. And I don't want to hear an argument that, actually there's a medical reason to do this. And, no, there isn't. It's not a good one.
Yeah. No.
There's on a list. I mean, I don't know how many projects are funded by Bill Gates and other Mike Bloomberg and our governments around the world doing, cutting edge medical research. But pick the top 100 projects. Do 2 a week. We don't need to do thousands and thousands of these projects and get to the point where some moron is actually going to work. There's probably like a whole workflow proposal and reports. Today we put sandflies in 16 new dogs, and it was fun to. I mean, it's just diabolical stuff to be doing. And I love to hear somebody try to defend it, because then we'll defend the experiment, because then we know who else to fire.
Right. I mean, I think you're talking in part about these studies about, Rand Paul was talking about studies having to do with quails on cocaine. That was one of the studies that they were actually doing. Look at how much money they spent on that. Cocaine and risky sex habits of quail. So they're like, going down to the bar and just picking up whatever unknown quail, doing a line.
Is that Dan Quayle, or is that a bird?
Exactly. It could be. Now, I just wanted to say, Charles, I've been reading this book, The Hidden Nazi, by Dean Reuter. It's about the untold story of America's deal with the devil. I think a lot of people have heard about Operation Paperclip, and it's a complicated thing, because when I was listening to the book Operation Paperclip, they were making a case from the standpoint of people at the time. World War II ended, and there was a big concern that the Soviet Union was going to scoop up all these Nazi scientists and use them. This was like the Cold War mentality. But then somebody made a great analogy where they said that perhaps this Operation Paperclip, despite those concerns, in retrospect, it's a bit like adopting a feral dog. In the end, if it winds up killing you, that wasn't such a good idea. And I think we need to seriously question, where did that research go? Where did that Nazi medical research that has been acknowledged was integrated into American universities, American government institutions, maybe including the CDC and the NIH, the Ochsner Health Center, who knows where it all went. But we haven't really had a full accounting of this. This is one of these things that they sort of like admitted to and told us it was shut down, but we don't know if that's true. And, Fauci is a pretty old guy. Did he work with any of these scientists? Was his research sort of born out of this era? It's a troubling question to contemplate.
Well, yeah, this whole line of, in quotes, thinking that there are some topics that are so evil and so dangerous that the President of the United States and other top people can't know about these projects. They don't have a need to know. And the reason we have to do this is because if we don't do it, somebody else will do it. And they may do it and figure, you do this research and develop a weapon or something, and that they can then use against us. So we've got to do the same research and make sure that this weapon is not used against us, and that we don't use it against other people. And that's just a way of thinking that's just so badly wrong. And what we need to do is we need to have teams that are identifying people around the world who may be doing this. And if they're doing it and they're allies of ours, they get a knock on the door from us and say, listen, you can't be an ally of the United States if you're going to be doing this, and you've got to cease and stop this, and you've got to punish these people ASAP. As far as our enemies, I'm not really in favor of sending hitmen around the world, but if it's somebody who's trying to develop a dread weapon that could exterminate the human race, that's a threat to every American citizen. And, I would be in favor of hunting those people down and making sure that they, live a short and painful remainder of their lives.
Charles, should we play Guess the Nazi? I'll give you a hint. It's not John F. Kennedy, and I don't think Lyndon Johnson was exactly a Nazi, but this guy has got...
He's not my area, so I don't really know a lot about that.
He's a Nazi. And I mean, look at this pin. I wonder what that pin is all about. I'm not exactly sure who this is seated next to JFK here at NASA, but this is an Operation Paperclip. I don't think that's Werner von Braun, but he was a Nazi. And basically we would not have NASA or a nuclear missile program without Operation Paperclip.
I wouldn't go so far. We wouldn't have it at the speed that we had it, but it's not clear we wouldn't have had it at all.
Right.
And so
this guy was a V2 scientist, Kurt Diebus. So these V2 rockets were really early rocket. The Germans were so advanced.
Isn't that pronounced Doofus? Kurt Doofus?
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't. This is a very dangerous way of thinking. I think the way people in the CIA and other intelligence, in quotes, intelligence services do think, and I think we're in a place where we're already hemorrhaging too much money on government. We don't have, we're not rich anymore our government is not anymore, and so we shouldn't be engaged in, on a small level, research studies about the risky sex habits of cocaine-loving quail. I mean, I would bet you, that's just a throwaway. That's only $356,000. There are probably projects here that are 100 million, $1 billion, $5 billion, the $93 trillion Green New Deal. I mean, here are people, I don't know if you've been following the weather that much given where you are, but up here there was talk of a big snowstorm coming days before, these anchors or weather people across many channels were all saying, well, you better stock up, you better get nervous. It's going to be a gigantic, what do they call it, a snow cyclone or something like that?
Oh, polar vortex.
Yeah. And, a big fat nothing. And these are the same people who can't predict the weather 48 hours out. There's nothing here yet. I mean, maybe it'll happen tonight, but they can't predict the weather 48 hours out. And they want to tell us that we need to abandon fossil fuels within 9.3 years or the planet's going to go poof. I mean, there needs to be more balance here. And the way you get that balance is you go and you look at the Chicken Little sky is falling arguments that folks like Fauci and Birx and many others have made, including Hillary and AOC. And you got this money together for the global fund. Where's it gone? Some estimates say to fight HIV and AIDS. Some estimate that 75% of that money's been stolen.
Well, $300,000 of it went to buy Coke for the scientists who were having quail for dinner.
That's right. They're having sex together, probably.
Yeah. Well, we've covered quite a few topics today, Charles. What else would you like to discuss?
I think that's pretty good. I think this will be a real work week in theory. We only have a couple, maybe 3 weeks left. And another thing we should briefly talk about is whether the House and Senate are actually going to get funding for the government together. I would guess that this Build Back Better plan is DEAD, based on what I've been hearing so far, but you never know. And clearly the woman from, was it Kazakhstan, who was in the communist
did she get rejected?
Decisively. The 5 Democratic senators said no fucking way. And so she's out. And
That's great.
I think you're going to see more of that now. I mean, as people have been on Thanksgiving, they've been talking, the people have to raise money for campaigns, have been talking and saying, so in 2022, can we count on your support for AOC? And they're hearing NFW.
Really?
That's I believe. Tell that idiot to go back to being a bartender and shut the F up. I mean, on the heels, to give you an example, on the heels of the Waukesha thing that they're trying to cover up and say was an accident, wasn't propulsive. On the heels of that, after that happened, after this career criminal, who I believe stands accused of underage sex trafficking and other problems.
He admitted it in a TikTok video.
And he's also, he's run over another, it's not
the woman that he in the TikTok video, he talks about how she was hoeing and I was pimping, and she told the cops, I didn't know she was 16. Yeah, she's my baby mama. And then he punched her and apparently tried to run her over with this same car. And the thing is, look, obviously a lot of people are very sensitive to seeing gruesome and violent videos, and I'm not going to show it. But if people go on to things like BitChute and Rumble and things that aren't so prone to editing videos, there is no close-up graphic depiction of anyone being maimed, but there is an overhead cell phone video from somebody in an apartment building or something way above, which shows the guy steering through the crowd toward people, like driving the car toward people, over people. It's an obvious deliberate act.
Yeah, but after all this, after this became known, and as the mainstream media tried to cover it up, AOC had the nerve to say that, you know, this only accentuates her interest. And I mean, this guy was out on like what was it, $5,000 bail for the other offense, or $1,000? $1,000. Yeah, so he was out on bail, does this, kills little kids and grandmothers purposefully. And AOC says, oh no, we need to be more lenient. This proves that we need to be even more lenient. I mean, this person is literally, AOC, stuck on stupid. I mean, she's unqualified. Alongside many of her, I mean, who's that idiot from Georgia who is concerned about global warming because these islands are going to tip over?
Right, capsize. I forget who that was.
There's a whole collection of people who have IQs and engaged brains that are lower and less effective than Joe Biden.
Well, and I would have said that Rashida Tlaib is definitely in that crowd. I wasn't too impressed with Jonathan Swan's interview of Donald Trump, but he did a good job interviewing Rashida Tlaib, who is apparently supporting a bill. I mean, Charles, this is straight out of the Weather Underground and Ho Chi Minh. She just wants to let everybody out of prison. No prison.
Right.
Doesn't seem like a good idea to me. I think there's a lot of extremely dangerous people in prison. I don't disagree that there are problems. Certainly for-profit prisons don't seem like a good idea to me. Putting people in prison for petty drug crimes doesn't seem like a good idea to me. But if you're going to murder people and run people over with your car and assault people with weapons, I fully agree with locking somebody in a box. I'm not even necessarily concerned with rehabilitating them. I just want to take them out of society so that regular people can go to Louis Vuitton if they want, or the Nike store, or the CVS, and not have to worry about getting hit on the head with a bat and have their wallet taken.
Or how about, going to a drive-through or having people commit unspeakable. I mean, there's somebody in one or more of these fast food restaurants didn't get the food the way he or she wanted it, so start beating the shit out of the people. I mean, we have to, that's part, I think, of a larger discussion. We glorify violence. We glorify aberrant behavior across all major media and social media platforms. And when you glorify it, and when there are no consequences for behavior, no bad consequences, or worse, when you get rich promoting this kind of stuff, what do you expect is going to happen? People are going to say, look, I don't want to go study. I'm going to have a bunch of people deal drugs. I got a whole bunch of hookers, and, I'll have fun.
You can make a ton of money shoplifting. Somebody was saying that there's...
And I won't even have to eat that quail.
Right. Some people were saying that they are organizing flash mobs on social media to go and do these... just smash and grabs. And I saw a video from, I don't know if it was from San Francisco. It was talking about the expansion of these flash mob smash and grabs where it just looked like a small independent jewelry store at the mall where the new move is to go to Home Depot, steal a sledgehammer, then use that to smash the case at the jewelry place and take all the stuff. And then I guess they're just fencing it, selling it on the street.
It's outrageous. And honestly, this is one where you would have thought, we like to hear about bipartisan solutions. You would have thought that there's somebody on the left, like Barack Obama as an example, and somebody on the right, perhaps somebody, Donald Trump, somebody the polar opposite of Barack Obama, who could get together and say, look, finally, here's something we agree upon. This is street thuggery. We don't believe in this stuff.
No, Obama wants it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Christmas is coming around. He's got to buy some trinkets for his wife and daughter. I'm not saying he would do that, but
I think that, when we think about Barack Obama's history with the Weather Underground and his affinity for Saul Alinsky, I think that this is what he wants, releasing people from prison, chaos in the streets. This is the fundamental change to America we heard about. I'm looking for, there was this is it. It's just like super duper awkward photo of Trump and Obama in the White House. I guess nobody really said anything about the fact that Trump and Biden never did this bizarre little photo op. Did they?
No, it was actually kind of an interesting tradition that was broken. I don't know if Trump left the letter for Biden, but there is a tradition.
The letter was F.
Yeah,
that was the letter.
Plastic bag filled with what. But these are handwritten letters that people take. The presidents write them themselves, and they take some time on it, and it's left in the Oval Office desk there, Resolute desk, for the next president to read, and they're private. No one. I mean, to my knowledge, they haven't been published. I think that's a good tradition, frankly, to do that.
The toilet in the Oval Office runs. You might have to jiggle it.
I wouldn't, Bill to W. I wouldn't give your daughters a tour of the entire Oval Office complex for
don't use a black light on the couch. But so Trump did not leave a letter for Joe Biden?
Trump wasn't there, right? I mean, he just left and didn't participate in the process. I don't know what he did, actually, but...
And he wasn't at the inauguration either. Was that the first time a president ever did that?
I don't know. I mean, there was... it may have been the first time.
I think it's
so.
Cool.
We'll have I'm sure, a lot more words out of Trump, a lot more drama through the end of the year here. Let's hope that the market rethink the panic that we were in on Friday. Goldman Sachs, which you can say what you want about the giant vampire squid, which is what Matt Taibbi refers to them as. But they have some smart people there. They say the sell-off was overdone.
I like that. It was funny that we've got politicians weighing in on medical stuff, and now we have huge investment banks saying, "Oh no, the virus." Oh, what is this?
Just hit X in the upper right.
Yeah, Goldman Sachs says it's unlikely. They know. I don't know why they're not getting banned from YouTube for medical misinformation. How does Goldman Sachs know if the mutation is going to be malicious or not? Have they tested it?
I don't know. Pretty smart.
Isn't that weird, Charles?
It is. Well, they've. My screen is now black from that story. I don't know.
Oh, black screens matter. I don't know what's that. Well, listen, if a doctor walked into Dillon Reed and started telling you what to do about investing, I can imagine what you'd do. Yeah. And likewise, when the investment company is telling people about medical stuff, it's like, what is going on in this world?
Well, I mean, we have bartenders telling us that we need to spend $93 trillion on the Green New Deals. I mean, get used to it. We got LeBron James telling you this and Colin Kaepernick telling you that.
But if Joe Rogan says anything, he's not qualified, according to somebody.
Good.
Well, Charles, thank you for joining me in this remote segment. I'm still enjoying the Thanksgiving time off here. well, not really off, but just hanging out for Thanksgiving. And I want to remind people that they can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. I've started offering holiday gift subscriptions that people can purchase with cryptocurrency. You're going to get 2 for 1 on your sponsorship with cryptocurrency, but people can go to crowdsourcethetruth.com and check out the various options for the Counter Lawfare Fund. And Charles, I will see you on Wednesday. I'll see everybody else tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your Thanksgiving weekend. Have a